Hello and welcome to A Game of Two Halves. I'm your host Blake Bint for today's episode, where we'll be talking to Head of USW Sports Steve Savage, checking in on one of our graduates and giving an update on Louis Rees-Zammett's journey to the NFL through the International Player Pathway Programme. But first, the sporting headlines around South Wales. In football, Swansea's progressive run of recent form came to a blunt end after a 1-0 loss to Bristol City at Ashton Gate. A goal from Robins defender Rob Dickey sealed the fate. Cardiff City were also in action as they came from behind in injury time to dispatch Ipswich 2-1. They're looking to carry this win into their next fixture against Swansea this weekend in the South Wales Derby. In rugby now, as the capital of Wales prepares for Super Saturday, Wales look to scrape their way out of the wooden spoon place against current holders Italy at the Principality Stadium. The fixture will be a homecoming for Italian scrum half and Carmarthen-born Stephen Varney, who has been very impressive in this year's tournament. Wales will attempt to move on from their 45-24 defeat to a weakened French side on Sunday. An experimental starting 15 for the Welsh crumbled, and it'll surely be back to the drawing board for Gatland and his men. In darts, the Premier League makes its way to Nottingham, where Welshman Gerwyn Price faces off against Peter Wright in the first round, as both look to get the seasons off the ground and finally win a night. It's been nothing short of a disappointing round of fixtures for the Iceman, as his biggest achievement was reaching in the final in Cardiff in night one. And finally in ice hockey, the Cardiff Devils took down Nottingham Panthers 6-2 this past weekend, keeping the title race alive between them and Sheffield. They stand at 75 to 64 points respectively. Next up, we have an interview of one of our esteemed graduates who has gone from starting university during COVID to having a career in sports journalism less than a year after graduating the course.
Hi, I'm Chris Stoddage and I graduated from USW last year. Obviously started studying in 2020.
How did COVID affect you, whether that's personally or with your studies?
I would argue it benefited me positively. Some people may not agree with that, but I think that the fact that firstly, obviously COVID came along in the March of 2020, so my A-levels were cancelled. I'd already got an unconditional offer from USW, so I was pretty set on that anyway. But then I came along, and before I came to uni, I focused heavily on improving my skills that I would need. So the likes of graphic design, which I now look back and still think they're pretty rubbish, but I was pretty ahead of the game. Video editing, writing, especially, were the three things that I focused on, and I think I did really well on those, and to get basically 6 months of uni before anyone else did. And then obviously coming to uni living in Cardiff alone. I lived alone in COVID, which was hard. But then because I didn't really have much option else, I worked and I honed my skills even more. Like, I think students nowadays have a lot of pressure to do other things apart from work and study, but that was the one thing that I had, and so yeah, my first year was very boring but very, very beneficial. When I came on this course, I wanted specifically to be a journalist, a writer. I think sports journalism, this course, probably needs to change its name, because it's not just about writing reports, it's not just about covering clubs or whatever. It's about sort of developing your whole media skills and persona, and creating a personal brand for yourself. I came in, as I said, as a writer. I did a lot of writing across different grounds, Premier League, Championship, and Newport County as well. And then I fell in love with graphic design. I absolutely did. I loved, creating social media graphics and presenting as well. It's always something I wanted to do anyway, but I loved speaking in front of camera. So I think the graphic design element, which is now a huge part of my job now, in a different way, is something that I think I learned and honed at university more than I expected to.
So you just mentioned obviously graphic design being a huge part of your job now. Could you explain more about your role and what you do and who you work for?
Yeah, of course. So it's my role title is Digital Media Officer at World Snooker Tour. I'd never really professed to be a snooker fan. I'd always watched the World Championship and maybe the Masters. But never really go out of my way to watch anything or I'd know too much. I'd love to play it, but obviously there's not too much access around. And I applied for the job just because of the specifications that The skills I have are quite wide, so more like a jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing. And that's what this job entailed, really. Basically what I do is, on a day-to-day basis, I cover the snooker. So whatever snooker is going on, and believe me, it is non-stop. Post on social media, reply to our commercial obligations. There's so much stuff behind the scenes that people won't see. Just this week we've announced a new partnership with Cash Store, so they're now going to be supplying all of our kit for the next 5 years. So yeah, my job is really to keep everyone happy on the digital side of things, and that's probably the only way I can describe it, because in terms of skill base, it's so wide.
If you could give any word of advice to prospective students or current students, what would that be, with your expertise, so to say, and how you've been through the course and you've moved on into a career?
Never give up, I think, is the one thing, and always work hard, because everything else is out of your hands. The only thing you can control is how you do it. So before I applied for this job that I'm in now, I applied for, I would say, 15 to 20, got interviews to 10, 12 of them, and they weren't successful, or they were successful and I turned them down for certain reasons, because they weren't right. I think you just need clarity in what you want to do, and if it feels right, go for it. For me, there's a lot of people who maybe will come into this course or come into university and still come out not having a clue what they want to do, and that's absolutely fine. That's not an issue. But when something feels right, or even if you have to, work in a shop or whatever, work in a takeaway, whatever, and maybe find something else away from that, and that is absolutely fine. So my advice would be, don't panic, never give up, and just wait for the right moment, because it will come.
It's a pleasure to be joined in the studio by Steve Savage now, Head of USW Sport and Director of Football at Pontypridd United. So Steve, thank you very much for joining me in the studio. So firstly, just Director of Football at USW, just give a sort of insight into what your job is as Head of Sport and how that time's been for you.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Head of Sport USW is basically responsible for the non-academic sport at the university, so overseeing the facilities, the partnerships and what we do inside our buildings really, and try and facilitate a good sporting offering for our students. And in that role now, you've obviously had to work on a lot of things. You've got a lot of sports to manage within the university, and how was that side work of it? Yeah, challenging at times. The financial climate of the university and in the world at the moment is not great. It's looking after kind of 3 key sports at the moment. So football, rugby and netball are what we call our performance sports. So they're our focus. All sports and on all activities are important to us. So it's a challenge, but the key for me is to try and create as many opportunities for our students. You mentioned those 3 sports there. You introduced performance programs this year and partnerships with various programs. Just explain a little bit about that in netball, rugby and football. Yeah, so facilities dictate and lend themselves to support certain sports. So football, rugby, netball are 3 of our key sports at the moment. Partnerships with Welsh Netball, partnerships with the FAW, Football Association of Wales, and links with community rugby clubs as well. So the performance sports, as we call them, the men's and women's football, men's and women's rugby and netball. So introduced them 18 months ago, and they've had huge success this year in Bucks. So our women's team won the Bucks Premier League, so which is great. The women's rugby are in a national final next week at Loughborough against Liverpool, and our netball won their league. So those performance sports, as we call them, are doing really well under the guidance of qualified coaches and a bit of structure that the university lend to them. So those and the partnerships that then we help to kind of recruit and raise the profile of the university. So those target sports as we've got, they're doing okay. If we just come on to those individual sports, the football. We'll start with the men's side have had less success than perhaps under Lee Kendall back in 2019, but still flying in the Premier South as well, and then the women, like you said, getting their Premier South title this year under Kath Morgan. Just talk a little bit about how that's great for the university and sort of the testament to what Kath brings as someone with a wealth of her experience. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it's not all about winning. I'm a competitive person, as most of us are, and we like winning, but it's not all about winning. But Kath's done a great job with the women's team obviously to get promoted first and foremost a couple of seasons ago into the Premier League and to win it this year is fantastic. Great for that group and everyone around it. Not so for the men's team, but again, it's a cycle. Normally it's a 3-year cycle of recruitment and the players that we've got studying at university. So, you know, the lads getting relegated is not great, but again, they will bounce back from it. And then on the women's rugby, for them to get promoted and stay in that league and hit a national final is fantastic. And the netball programme for them to be in the league and win that league for the first time in a number of years is fantastic. So it's it's great for Kath and all those coaches and heads and leads that are supporting them. My job is to try and facilitate and help them achieve their goals, supporting our students.
And then netball and rugby, the other two with the partnerships. So the netball getting their Bucks title and the rugby, they've got a nice trip up to Loughborough to face Liverpool in their cup final next week. So it's a great opportunity of them. But you mentioned a 3-year cycle. How do you manage that as head of sport? And it must be difficult because you never know what's going to come in those 3 years. Yeah, really difficult. The performance manager roles have only been in post 18 months. It sounds a long time. It's not. Development is normally a 3 to 5 year cycle, recruitment of students in that cycle. So it is difficult. It's difficult to plan year on year, especially with the financial climate that we're heading into now as universities. It makes it challenging. But the key is just to try and put a framework and a structure in place to support them. You mentioned the Welsh Netball link is great. Having a regional academy based out of the USW Sport Park is great. So that has definitely aided us to support with the netball offering. And good luck to the women's rugby in the final next week at Loughborough against Liverpool. Let's hope they come away with a positive performance and a good result. And just finally as well, as head of sport, how do you look to carry the university forward? You mentioned the cycles, but how's the long-term plan looking? Tough question with the financial climate, but I think the key is to have a plan, make sure that we can execute that plan, make sure fundamentally my role and what my passion has been in HE for 25 years to make sure there's opportunities for students and a variety of sports available to them. But I think it's to have a plan and cut our cloth accordingly and make sure we can deliver that for our students and keep having success. Well, brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve, for that insight, and thank you very much for joining us on A Game of Two Halves. Welcome. Staying on the topic of the USW Sports Park, we caught up with final year football coaching student and assistant manager of Swansea City Ladies Under-19s, James Vidler.
My name's James Vidler. I am the assistant coach for Swansea City Women's Under-19s. Most kids grew up wanting to be a professional football player or another sport. I was football, obviously, and you get older and you realise that that's not going to be the case. I happened to actually coached my sister's team at one point. So she was in a mixed team down where I'm originally from in Devon, and fell in love with coaching. I loved it. It was a way for me to really be involved in the game much more than being a fan, without playing, because obviously that just wasn't possible, not at a high standard anyway. So between the passion and I really like the man management side of it as well, making sure that the team runs smoothly, making sure all the players are alright, making sure they are happy in the environment that I create. If there are any issues, I'm more than happy to step up and deal with them. I'd like to think I'm quite quick on my feet in that sense. So I think the main bit would be the passion, though. I think for the sport, I spend my weekends watching football. My week, if there's football on, I'll watch it, just even if it's on the background while I do work. It does consume my life to a point. When I first joined, I sort of felt a bit out of place. Some of my players are older than me. Like, why on earth would they listen to me? Sort of thing is how I came in feeling. But all credit to the girls. They took a very, very short amount of time to accept me and sort of accept, like, right, this guy knows what he's talking about. Manager trusts him, so we'll trust him. And now I'm more than happy to have a laugh and a joke with them. As I said at the start, we got a very, very good working relationship between me and my manager, me and the players, and just the club in general. I think it's such a positive place for me to be at the moment, and every session I come out with a smile on my face. Even if we lose, there is a bit of, why have we lost that? And then by the end of it, by the time I'm in my car, smiling again because of what I'm involved with. I think that, so in terms of how my age influences, in football in general, it's more of a you play until you're 30, 35, and then you end up going into coaching. Well, I've just cut the playing bit out. It does mean that sometimes I feel like some people sort of look at me and go, well, he's young, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But you know, I'd like to think I've proved that by now, that I do know what I'm on about. I quite like the idea of going to America. University football, soccer as they call it, is something that really interests me. I think that being able to help a student, in a sense, become either a professional athlete, or, you know, if they don't even become an athlete, they're still able to get a degree and get something out of the experience. But it also, you know, is moulding young people into, you know, good citizens, good people, and in some cases top athletes that, you know, are going to keep their head on straight. And I'd like to say that I'm good enough to do that, and you know, that would be a real drive for me. So football is very much a case of right place, right time. You know, I might end up in Italy, Japan, I don't know. I'm more than happy to work abroad, so it will sort of be we'll see what comes on the table, and if, you know, I'll apply for things. If I get accepted, then I'll consider it, and that'll basically be it.
And our final story this morning comes all the way from Penarth to Palm Springs with an update on Louis Rees-Zammett's journey to the NFL through the International Player Pathway programme. He could have a chance to join the company of some elite British products of the IPP, running back Christian Wade and defensive lineman F.A. Obada. Zammett and 15 other athletes across the world have been hard at work in the IMG Academy in Florida, looking ahead to the IPP Combine on the 20th of March, where they will have a chance to show their skills with set drills and team interviews. This comes shortly after the NCAA Combine last week, where the college players around the USA showcased themselves and compete for a spot on the upcoming draft. One of the highlights of the weekend was a direct competitor of Zammett's named Xavier Worthy, a wide receiver out of Texas University who broke the record for the 40-yard dash, clocking an impressive 4.22 seconds. Zammett will surely be looking to replicate this to secure a spot on an NFL roster next season. That's all we have time for today on this episode of Game of Two Halves. Join us next when we'll be visiting Barrytown United Under-19s team to speak to manager Damien Flynn, as well as speaking to second-year student Leah Bauer about life at USW, revealing what our students do at the USW Sports Park with the University Bucks fixtures, and we'll be going to an amateur boxing gym in Newport, and we'll be joined in the studio by Academy Manager at Cardiff City, Gavin Chesterfield.
And 3 points for both teams. It should be a very competitive game.
I've been Blake Bint. To our guests and viewers, thank you for watching and goodbye.